Jason Evans, welcome to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thank you so much.
And Merry Christmas, I do believe.
Happy holidays to you as well. We're almost there. We're in the middle of Hanukkah right now, and Christmas is a couple days away.
There's some indication in something I'm seeing on the video here that indicates Christmas. I'm not sure what it is. It's kind of subtle.
Who knows?
Yep. And I have to check in on the weather because it's been a little dramatic, I believe, up where you are. I'm in Southwest Colorado, where it's pretty nice, actually, mid 30s.
You know, it snowed last night here in Denver, and then the storm went away, and so the temperature just dropped. But it's lovely as long as you're inside. So
Yeah. I heard things like -4 and -10 and stuff like that.
yeah, those are the highs. So
Yeah. Well, we've got two things to talk about. One for sure is the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers program coming up in late January. And we want to get to and talk about your short story collection you've got coming out imminently, I believe, correct?
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to postpone a little. It's probably gonna come out at the end of January. I'm still waiting for a couple of beta reader critiques, but yeah, it's gonna come out pretty soon in the next 35 days. Let's say that.
Okay. Well, let's start with the program, if you don't mind. Let's start with the program you've got lined up, and you are the education chair for Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers currently, correct?
I am, and one of the challenges is restarting all the programs that we had started that we had been supporting before the pandemic, and one of those was a once a year January program where people would come to the Table Mountain Inn in Golden, spend a day of going to multiple classes and have lunch, and being able to talk to some of the writers and speakers. And so that's what we're restarting. It's this year. It's going to be January 28th, Saturday, January 28th. It's called A Day of Genre. I've got Eric Gonzalez, who was a former Rocky Mountain Fiction Writer of the Year, and local legend Stant Latore, who writes all types of weird fiction. He's going to come, and then the indie romance writing duo of Ashley Vasquez and Lauren Gabaron. They write under McKenna Rose. They've published, I think, 50 books in the last 4 years. So they're going to be, all three of them are going to be talking about their individual genres and the tropes and what makes those genres tick. I chose this kind of day specifically because I think a lot of new writers are really impassioned about the genres they're reading, and then they write an amazing book, but then they can't get it published, or they decide to self-publish, and the sales aren't always there, even though they've done all the marketing. And one of the things I found out early on is that genre fiction is largely about the tropes. If you don't have the tropes in place there, people will not like your book. And so I just wanted to have that kind of conversation, or with our beginning writers and beginning new members.
Interesting. Yeah, tropes are kind of a funny thing there, that you can have something can be too tropey and so obvious, and yet I think I understand what you're saying, that people reading genre, they want to be in a comfortable space. They want to have a sense of expectation that they're going to get a lot of maybe spice and variety around those rules, but they still want to have a book that follows the pattern.
Yeah, it's like going to a restaurant, going to a steakhouse and ordering a porterhouse, right? You can mess with the cut a little bit, you can mess with the temperature, but if you get away from salt and pepper as a seasoning, people are going to ask for their money back, right? Because you don't want a whole lot of coriander, you don't want a lot of dill in your steak. You want salt and pepper, maybe a little garlic powder, and at least I do, and that's about it. And so that's how I like to treat this concept of tropes. right? And the great thing is, even people who subvert the tropes are still honoring the tropes because they have to, there's I think they're still honoring the tropes because without the tropes, there's nothing to subvert. And I think there's a you have to be very careful. And I think a lot of times emerging writers, I know myself, when I was an emerging writer, I didn't really get that concept. And so I'm writing all these things, and they're like, "Is that really supposed to be in historical fiction? Is that really supposed to be in science fiction?" So uh,
Yeah.
I hope the day will be of service to people who come.
So day of genre, Saturday, January 28th. Is it at the same location in Golden where previous events have been?
Yeah, it's called the Table Mountain Inn,
Yep.
and it's going to be $55 per person, and that includes a buffet lunch, and then there will be um, a cocktail hour when we're done, so you can meet all the authors and have more intimate conversations. If you're interested in buying the authors' books, they will be bringing the books there as well. So
Great. In the past years of those day-long programs, they've had so one-on-one pitch session opportunities and things like that, or little breakout things. Is that going to be happening, or this is basically three presentations?
yeah, we're going to be doing three presentations, two at a time, while one of the authors is in the break, kind of like the break room, so you can have further discussions if you've seen something they've already done, and then there'll be the cocktail hours. We got to start slowly at this point. But one of the other things that I want to do when the summer comes back is restart our free program we used to do in local libraries all throughout the spring and summer. So there are big plans from the education part of RMFW. We're going to try to launch a whole bunch of stuff this year. So, or I should say next year. So
Yeah.
wish us luck. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting just in terms of in person and getting that back and getting people back in the groove, because for years there were monthly programs, free, like you say, free monthly programs in libraries all over Metro Denver, and you kind of never knew what topic it might be, and it was sort of like a couple hours of really inspiring but free something every month. It was great.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I cut my teeth with RMFW. Going to the Colorado Gold is an amazing event, but it's a little overwhelming, especially if you're new and you don't know anybody. But the free programs, I think, were a little bit more intimate, a little more focused on the class itself. And I remember we used to even bring food and snacks so people wouldn't have to worry about getting hungry and dashing out and bringing food in and all that other stuff. So, yeah, that's my desire to try to do that limited in the late spring and throughout the summer. And then maybe in 2024, if I can find enough authors who are willing to participate, uh, do a 10-month program.
Yeah. Well, I was previous education chair at one point, and also prior to that was the snack guy, the refreshments guy. And I gotta say, it sounds like a kind of a, I don't know, kind of basic or somewhat entry level point to the organization, but it was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah, yeah.
Was starting to bring refreshments to those meetings, and then just sort of seeing the variety of presentations, and then quote unquote moving up to education chair and hosting those events. Absolutely the best thing I ever did in terms of getting involved in the organization and meeting presenters, listening to attendees questions, and facilitating networking and things like that. It's just terrific.
Well, and what I really liked about it, you'd have old hands like an Aaron Michael Ritchie, right?
Yeah.
Who everybody knew. But then you'd have people who had. There was this one woman who did one on romance, and I think she literally flew in for the weekend, and was on a plane that Sunday morning, and I've never seen her again. And so the variety, the depth of knowledge that was presented, and the breadth of presenters was really something special. I always came away learning something from those events. And the price was great.
Yeah. Yeah, all it took was a drive. You drive somewhere
Yeah,
and on a Saturday afternoon, get to think about your favorite thing in the world, which is writing for a couple hours. It's great.
absolutely. And what the other thing I liked, it was sometimes it was about genre, sometimes it was about marketing, sometimes it
Right.
was about grammar, sometimes it was about organization. You just really you had to go to the website and see what the topic was, and you were bound to learn something, or at least think about something you hadn't thought about before. So
Right. Right. Precisely. Do you have enough help? I mean, I guess I'm asking, should we put out the word on your behalf that if you would welcome a couple of people helping you with any aspect of the logistics around those pending monthly programs, would you?
yeah, that would be amazing. I have in the past put on events when I lived in Los Angeles, but those were kind of once a year events that had built-in organization around them. And so I was just basically the guy who put the starting and middle and closing time schedules together, and presented the check to the person who ran the hall. But uh, there's so many parts of this job that are new and challenging to me, that I have to be humble enough to realize that I don't know it all. And so any help anybody out there wants to give me, from supporting by being an assistant to just reaching out and saying, hey, here's an idea, I'm open to anything.
Great. What's is the best way to reach you if somebody heard this and wanted to reach out to you?
I have a Facebook page. Best way is to get me on PM.
Okay,
You can either do Jason Evans, or my writer Facebook page is Jason Henry Evans.
there you go.
So
Yeah,
either one is fine with me.
yeah, great, great. All right, so day of genre, January 28th, full day, right? Those usually start pretty early and go pretty late.
Yeah, we're gonna start at 9 and probably be over by 3:30. The cocktail hour, I believe, starts at 3:30.
Yeah, okay, great. And
And,
again,
and lunch is provided for the cost of admission. So
yeah, and if that is a bargain, and I gotta say the lunches they put on there are quite the spread. It's
oh
very
yeah,
impressive. Yeah, yeah.
that'll be
So
nice.
excellent. Well, it's great to have that back in the groove.
Yeah, let's hope we get a lot of people. So
Yeah.
but I'm excited about it. The people that I've reached out to who want to participate are really great writers, and um, they're excited about sharing their knowledge, especially Stan Latore. He's a local legend at some of these smaller cons. He's been teaching classes on writing for as long as I've been in the community, so that's been at least 10 years.
And obviously, there's going to be some capacity in terms of how many folks you can take in there, right? First come,
I
first served?
Yeah, I want to say we're going to limit it to about 40,
Okay.
but I'll talk. I'll talk to the fire marshal and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
see what she says. But yeah, it'll be first come first serve, obviously.
Great.
So, and we should have something up on the RMFW website before the end of the year.
Fantastic. All right. Well, let's get to your short stories.
Sure.
What's the collection titled? And
Well, it's entitled "Stories I Tell My Friends," and as an indie author, I dabbled a lot in short story collections. And one of the things that another former member who's since moved east, his name was Quincy J. Allen. One of the things he told me is that, these anthologies are not forever, and check your contract. But generally speaking, after a year, you get your rights back. And so the question is, how do you redevelop this content for a new market? And so I had about 7 or 8 stories that the rights had reverted, everything from science fiction to steampunk to women's fiction. And then there were a couple short stories that I had given out to my email list um, in the last couple of years. And then there was 2 stories that were supposed to be part of anthologies, but the anthologies got canceled. So they've never been published before. So I've collected all these stories, science fiction, horror, steampunk, and everything in between, and women's fiction, and put them into one anthology. So it's kind of like a potpourri.
Potpourri. That's great. Smorgasbord.
A smorgasbord, yes.
Can
Yeah.
you smell the prose?
I hope so, and I hope they smell well.
Yeah.
They smell good to me, so we'll see what people think.
Yeah. And you said you were having some beta readers check the stories that are previously published, but you're doing some refinements.
Yeah, just little refinements here and there. As I have grown as a writer, I look back at some of the sentence structure, maybe subplots or dialogue, and I cringe. And so there's been some minor rewritings here or there. Also, there were a couple times when an editor said, "Well, this is a great story, but it's got to be under 10,000 words." And I'd originally written a 14,000 word story. So I'm taking the edits out and putting those cut pieces back in on a couple of occasions. So I hope people like it. I hope people like it.
That's a really interesting thing about looking back on some of your previously published works, or something maybe you wrote that didn't get published, and that cringe factor. Why do you think it is that we were able to write that at one point and not cringe, and then years later we look back and go, wow, that was not effective, or it was amateur or something?
Well, because your skill sets grow. You begin to write more passionately and more professionally. Um, I know myself, having a California public education, my depth of grammar was not as deep as it is now. I had crutch words that I don't use as much anymore. Um, when I was in my early 20s, I used to work at the Renaissance Fair in Southern California, and I was always struggling for cash. And so I used to make my own costume pieces. And so the management would give me an okay, but 5 years later, I could say, "Ooh, that stitch is horrible," or "What was I thinking with that color pattern?" Because I, as a tailor, an amateur tailor, I got better, and so my skill set grew. And I think it's the same thing with writing. You may be enamored with a particular kind of character and realize that character is kind of gauche in today's writing world. So I think it's just all part of the learning experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a sign of your growth, right? It's a sign that you're becoming a better writer when you can critique yourself.
Boy, is that true. And just being able to set your standards and move them up and keep them up, and say, just developing kind of an inner ear
Yes.
that says to yourself, that is able to both read, take it in, and say, green light, red light. It doesn't work, or it does work.
And what I've particularly grown appreciative of is my ability to enjoy my own writing while having my inner editor on. Right? I no longer think I'm a bad writer. I'm a bad person. I think at this point in time, that little spark, that sentence, that page was wonderful, but it could be better if I just did X, Y, and Z over here. And I think that's a really good place to be in. So,
Yeah. Do you find that that's true, that kind of analysis, with the big picture of a story, or do you find it's more true with the line by line kind of, awareness of whether a sentence is effectively put together, or a paragraph doesn't have the right flow to it? Do you think that awareness of the big picture of a story can you still have that same self-critical ability on the big picture stuff?
I think it's absolutely harder to do when you're trying to step back and look at the a big picture. Um, I go back to one of my favorite modern authors, George R. R. Martin, who is great when crafting a paragraph or a sentence, and he's great when contrasting and comparing plot lines. I don't know if you've ever read the arc of the Game of Thrones books, but there are things that are repeatedly happening to different characters in different times. They echo each other in the plot, and while I find that delicious, it's also very clear that he has not been able to step back and look at the forest, because he's written a pretty big forest,
Yeah.
and now he's in this scrambling position where he's got to cut some trees down. He's got to cut some trees down and maybe gets rid of some bushes, and I hope he does it. I'm rooting for him. I know myself, that's really, really hard to do, but that's why I try to write a big persuasive outline before I start the specific writing. That's why I try to think about theme now, a lot before the writing happens. Um, and so I can start plugging that stuff in a mechanical way. And of course, everybody's process is different. But to answer your question again, I just think it's easier to do when you're talking about a paragraph or a sentence or a page or even a chapter.
Yeah. Yeah. Care to tell us about one of your favorite short stories in the collection? What's your favorite story in that book?
My favorite story. So my favorite story is a story called "My Name Is Bob," and it's the story of a man who, at the very beginning of the story, his wife is going through labor, and she gives birth to a beautiful baby boy. But there's one problem. They're in an abandoned retirement facility in the middle of the zombie apocalypse. And so very quickly, his wife dies of shock because she has septicemia. And he doesn't even have time to mourn her. He's got to try to find baby formula and keep this baby quiet so that the roaming dead don't kill him and his baby. And I remember I'm very close with my wife, and I remember writing that opening scene where Bob's wife was giving birth, and she's trying to, she knows she's going to die, and she's trying to get his head on straight. And I just remember blubbering with tears as I'm writing this thing. It was so emotional for me. My wife and I don't have children, but I just could not imagine being in that situation.
Wow.
And having to take care of this newborn baby without the woman that you've created it with. So it's a hard hitting story, and it's not particularly graphic. I don't. Sometimes people say hard hitting, they mean it's graphic. I don't particularly like graphic, but what I find in zombie stories is, and it doesn't matter if it's a TV show, a movie, whatever. Yeah, you can have those graphic scenes, but there's got to be sorrow, right? The best zombie stories have sadness someplace in it, and your characters have to get to a point where they have to say, "Is this worth it?" And I think that story does it. So
Very cool. What I'm always curious with short story collections, how you sequence them.
So I'm still kind of in that process. Originally, I was going to do it by genre, and I'm rethinking that. One of my friends who's a professional editor, Lou Berger, he's been in a couple of sci-fi anthologies for Bain, and he was like, "No, you don't necessarily have to do it by genre because most anthologies are of one genre. So just pick the best story, put it in the back, take the second best story, make it the first story, put one of the really good ones in the middle, and just go from there." So that's kind of the decision I've come to. Short stories that are under 6,000 words combined, and then right after that there's a small novella that's 18,000, and then a 10,000 word behind that, right? And then I give a little bit of backstory of why this story was written and where the original anthology can be found. So we'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see if it works out.
Do you have a cover designed yet?
I do not. There's a cover artist that I used to work with. And incidentally, for all you guys who are indie authors and you're struggling with covers, you might want to check out Fiverr. There's some bang up professional cover designers on there that are pretty reasonable. My cover designer is actually from Ukraine. I haven't been in contact with her since the war started, so hopefully she's still working. And she is criminally cheap. She, my my Catholic guilt won't let me go away without tipping her at least $20 because
Wow.
she's that good. So
And that's Fiverr, Fiverr, I think it is.
.com, yeah,
.com, Fiverr.com. Gotcha.
yeah.
Very good. Well, this is a great rundown, Jason, and wish you well with the short story collection. And also on the January 28th event as well, of course.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, but the last question is always to pay it forward a little bit and to recommend a writer or a book that you read recently or something you read 20 years ago that's still your favorite book and just need to pass it along.
Well, currently, Stan Latore has been writing a bunch of toolbox books, and one of them is called Write Stories Your Readers Won't Forget. And he talks about organizing.
Hold it up closer. There you go. Yeah, great.
He talks about not only organizing, but using theme in your story, how theme can help push the story along. He's an amazing teacher, and I've just gotten into this book myself. He's written a couple other craft books. You can go to stanlatore.com and check out all his other books, and of course he's on Amazon as well. But I've learned a lot about the writing craft from him. So
I sense the fact that you are just trying to plug again the January 28th day-long conference by promoting the book. Yeah, I'm hip to your tactics here, Jason.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate that a lot. And if you've got nothing to do before the Super Bowl, and why don't you come by and check us out? We'll be at the Table Mountain Inn, January 28th. That's a Saturday. We'll be there all day, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So.
Jason, thanks for jumping on the podcast.
My pleasure.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Take care now.